Welcome, everybody, to another edition of Legal Tech Week. This is March 24th, 2023. I am Bob Ambrogi, and I'm the moderator of this thing. And we'll be talking about the conference I didn't get to go to this week, thanks to my little bout with COVID here, but hear all about Legal Tech Week and some of the other news from the week. I write a blog called Law Sites and have a podcast called Law Next. And our panelists this week, as you see them before you, let's kick it off. My upper left, Joe, you want to kick it off?
Sure. Joe Patrice from Above the Law and Thinking Like a Lawyer, the podcast. And my name says Joe Patrice, but it should say disheveled because that's how I feel after the events of the last couple of weeks. But I'm still here to talk a little bit of legal tech.
Sounds good. And Nikki Black.
I'm Nikki Black. I am on the beach in my mind, even if not in reality. I am the Senior Director of SME and External Education at my case, and I write legal tech columns for ABA Journal, Above the Law, the Daily Record, and I also oversee and write the My Case and LawPay Legal Industry Report and our benchmark reports as well.
All right, sounds good. Steve Embry.
Hi, Steve Embry. I write the blog Tech Law Crossroads, and I guess my name should say worn out because that's kind of how I feel after a legal week.
And Jean O'Grady.
Hi, I'm Jean O'Grady. I am, let's see, which title am I using? I'm the author and editor of Dewey B Strategic, and I also write a column for Legal Tech Hub.
And how many other titles do you have? You're going to be like Nikki Black. You can't keep track of your titles.
Right. No, I'll never catch up with Nikki.
All right. And last but not least, Stephanie Wilkins.
Hi. Yeah, Stephanie Wilkins, editor-in-chief of Legal Tech News at ALM. Coming off my first legal week, which I warned people I would be on my couch in pajamas, but I would still join. I don't even know what my title should be because I am beyond exhausted, but it was great. And I'm sure we will talk about that more.
Oh man, I wish you had told me we were doing Clash t-shirts today. I've got my favorite Clash t-shirt. I could have
we all should have worn our favorite band t-shirt. I'll let my Beatles one.
Yeah, I have multiple Clash shirts, so if you want to do it again, Bob, we can do that.
I got multiple Clash shirts too. I had one. I had a great Clash shirt that I'd actually gotten from the mother of one of the roadies for the Clash or something way back when I lived in the Virgin Islands. It was like my favorite shirt. I wore it for years, and my wife finally made me throw it away because it was like torn and falling apart, and I couldn't stop wearing it. But
I respect that.
yeah. Okay. Anyway, well, so I heard through my sources that Joe had 34 meetings this week with various vendors and whatever. So he gets some kind of a lifetime achievement award for press briefings, I think, out of that. Well, you had more? You had more, Nikki? But you're nodding.
Not
your
even
head
close.
like,
Not
nothing.
even close. I'm
could do
shaking my head
34.
at the sheer number.
Yeah. So I wasn't there, but all of you were. So I don't know, Stephanie, is your first one. What did you think? And you were like thrown right into the middle of the pond and learned to swim here this week.
Yeah, I don't know if my impressions are accurate by any means, but I mean, I had a great time. It was really busy. It went by really fast in a good way, like faster than I expected. I was obviously hectic for me, and I have no idea how many meetings I took, but I was on multiple panels. But it was great. It really went well. And I mean, again, I have no base comparison, but everybody I talked to pulled me aside and said it was, a great sense of energy, especially, like last year, I was like in the orbit last year, but everyone like didn't really know how to interact human to human yet, even though it was back in person. So, I mean, the huge takeaway was like, everyone was like, oh, it's so great. People were really, really excited. And my feet feel swollen. I didn't even think I was running around as much as I was, but yeah, I'm basically like a plug-in for AI on any given panel at this point.
I'll say about the show being lively and all. My one impression I had as somebody who's gone to the show now for quite some time, it felt more energetic than it has in a long time. I thought that even pre-COVID, the show was kind of on the decline and dying, and it is certainly not as crowded as it was when I first started going in 2013 or whatever. But it had an energy to it that it has not had in many years.
And I
I
can't.
heard
put my
that
finger on it.
universally. So yeah, sorry, go ahead, Nikki.
Oh, I agree. Like I can't put my finger on that and tech show, but this a little bit more than tech show for some reason. And I don't know exactly what it was. I mean, feels like the same show I've always gone to. I don't know if it's just that we were all excited to be back and all acting like human beings again, like Stephanie said, or if it was, I think it was also just the GPT sort of has everyone energized about the possibility, and both shows were able to pivot and include a bunch of GPT stuff. And it's just an exciting time to feel like you're in this space and there's like so many possibilities. So that may have contributed to it as well.
I agree. I do think that drove a lot of the energy. Although I had to laugh with the posters, the reveal posters everywhere. It looked like it was the reveal show. Did you all notice that?
Well, I mean, they're the headline sponsor. I think that was their.
I go bad for the other e-discovery platforms, you know.
Well, I wasn't there, but I did like the e-discovery suck truck outside of what looked like it was right outside of the Hilton, maybe, or something going on. I think that was Andy from Logical.
That was amazing. I don't even know what that was, but
I think it was Logical is what I heard. I'm not sure.
Okay.
But I still think there was an overrepresentation of e-discovery products.
Yeah, I mean, it is, as much as it has diversified from the old days, it is still ultimately e-discovery week. There are more things now, but it's still the biggest.
I mean, maybe next year it'll just be AI week, Joe. Would you prefer that?
I mean, it's real close to that already.
The other interesting pivot was that Fastcase it was listed as Fastcase, but they had a docket alarm booth. At the last minute, they realized that the product they were really coming to Legalweek to market was docket alarm and not Fastcase. So it was like Fastcase was like this little tiny logo at the bottom, you know, of the booth.
Yeah, on the AI front. On the AI front, I actually was talking, and this is some criticism potentially of the show. I was talking with some folks who were saying that they were a little put off. They felt that there was a lot less program in past years as they've moved from legal tech to Legal Week. There's been an effort to have more programming about the legal profession outside of tech to kind of show that it's a little bit bigger. And I talked to some folks who were saying, you know, there weren't even diversity panels as much as there have been in the last few years. And I said that wasn't true because I also saw somebody mention Google's BART is in addition to GPT. So there was some diversity, at least as the show was defining it. But no, it was kind of an issue where the AI stuff did dominate the conversation so much. It did squeeze out some of those initiatives that over the past few years we've seen of trying to do more like business of law outside of just tech. Not that it wasn't there, but it was being squeezed a bit, I thought.
Well, in a solo small track, is that gone? That used to be for like a year. It was like almost like a sub conference, and it seems to have disappeared this year.
That's
right?
gone.
In fairness, I kind of like that because I like that if this show were to stay in March, and I know it's going to move back, but being in March, I kind of always thought the last couple of years that it's been in March, I've been like, I don't need this track. That's why I was at Tech Show. I get to see all of that at Tech Show, which, as you pointed out, also had more energy this year. And now when it moves back to January or whatever, maybe that could come back. But
it was interesting watching it from afar and not being there this year, because watching it on social media, reading what people were talking about, you could sort of feel like there was a lot of energy, but the energy felt all around AI and GPT. And then when I kind of sat down to look at like what's all the news announcements coming out of the show, they're all like e-discovery and contracts and like the same old shit, although they're all, you know, incorporating some aspect. They're all, now we've got ChatGPT in our product, big deal. But so, you know, it was really interesting that it was, I mean, I think it's not far-fetched to say next year it is going to be all about AI and GPT.
It's funny, this morning I even got an email from Open Table saying they had added ChatGPT to Open Table. So
yeah, they announced plugins yesterday into, and you have to join the wait list. I've joined it, but I have not yet been granted access. Has anyone here got access to that yet?
Wait, this is the open table.
ChatGPT has plugins.
The plugins thing. Yeah.
It can tell you it's rejecting your reservation to the nice restaurant automatically.
Well, I think I think you can tell it. I want to make reservations tonight at this time for 2 people. What are my options? Okay, book it for me. And there's already
That's kind of what it already did.
well, but it doesn't have access to the internet, so it can't do that right now. But there are, I just wrote my Daily Record article, which I didn't include as a topic for this show because we were talking more about Legalweek, but about the plugins, not plugins, but unofficial integrations that I've discovered and stuff into ChatGPT. And there is one that lets you toggle on and off access to the internet. So you can run a search of the internet through ChatGPT and it gives you, current results that are external. And there's also other ones that toggle other things. Like one is like a prompt generator and you can find prompts people have already used so you don't have to rewrite them. There's quite a few, and there's another one that allows you to just push the button and speak to it so you don't have to type. So there is a number of different really interesting, not official plugins, but tools, browser extensions really is what they are right now. So
a lot of the vendors that I talk to seem to be more eager than in the past to develop and showcase integrations, both with other things that they were doing and also other developers, which I think is really kind of cool because, one of the complaints about legal technology over the years has been, we got so many products and they don't work together and it's all piecemeal and we got to go 10 different places and talk to 10 different 10 different developers, and it's just a royal pain. And so I think that's good. And I think actually the Chat GPT is probably, motivated people to talk in terms of that. The other thing I thought was, I kind of liked the show in March. It was a little warmer outside. Wasn't as cold. It didn't snow, which was a first for me for all the years I've been coming. And I think that kind of lifted people's spirits a little bit and maybe led to a little bit more of the excitement.
Yeah, I've heard a lot about this. Nobody seems neutral about the change of the date back. People are either overjoyed or dismayed. I mean, not that I have anything to do with that, but yeah, it's going back to where it always was. It was a COVID change to move it to March in the first place because they were trying to avoid post-holiday Omicron surges and things like that, especially last year. And so it's going back. And you know what? This week could have been horrible and snowy also in March. It's New York.
Right.
Yeah, you never know.
And I'm curious, on the AI programming part, it's interesting now that I have more of like an inside baseball view of it, is that, there's ALM tracks, but so many, like people sponsor sessions and they do, like Joe and I were on a relativity session, and a lot of those sponsors are e-discovery sponsors and they can kind of do whatever they want. And a lot of them just pivoted to AI, right? So it's not even like here's ALM forcing AI down your throat, even though that's sort of my role. But, yeah, it's, who knows by next year what we'll be talking. It'll be AI, but it'll be a different kind of AI. I don't know.
But I'd like to comment. One of the things I thought was at least one or two of the programs I went to that were sponsored by vendors. I thought the quality of the panelists they were not top flight. I mean, like there was one where I really had a lot of expertise and the person who was on the panel, I don't know. I just was I'm not sure you should be on this panel.
I'm going to jump in and point out. I'm going to jump in before that happens and point out Jean was not at the panel Stephanie and I were on.
No.
Clear.
No, I mean, we posted a daily roundup where our reporters and myself just like did our little reactions. And a couple of them made that comment on a few of the panels they were on also, that they were like, I don't even know that they know. Yeah.
Like, but what's your area of expertise? How did you get on this panel other than you bought the product?
But there were, that said, there were a lot. I mean, I unfortunately didn't even have a chance to go to a single panel that I wasn't on other than the LeVar Burton keynote. But there were a ton of them. I mean, there's so many panels, right? Like tons of them were amazing.
Yes. Yeah, no, I agree. But it just sort of irked me that there didn't seem to be really good vetting of the, and also you'd be in the, the other great pivot, Bob, I don't know if you heard about this, was the day one panel with a pre-panel on GPT. And I thought, as soon as I got there, I'm like, this room is too small. This room is too small. And the room was literally bulging. And Stephanie, you want to tell a story? How did that?
Yeah, well, I mean, they added that because you schedule all the programming so far in advance, and they definitely leave in wiggle room to add new topics like AI or things like that. And so, I mean, it wasn't like ChatGPT didn't even blow up until December, and then GPT started coming in January. It wasn't really long to change a massive conference schedule. So they added the 3-hour workshop on AI on Monday. And a lot of people don't even show up because the only other thing Monday night was the awards, right? But they had it, and they got the biggest room they had available by the Hilton at the time. Like on Monday, the Hilton wasn't even letting us in our press room. You know, they had the biggest room they had available. And then it was standing room only. I almost saw fist fights break out trying to get in it. I showed up. I couldn't even be there. I could only pop in and out because I had to do like dress rehearsal for the awards, you know? And then like I tried to get in. I heard the faces of the staff just trying to keep people out. They let me go in because I work at ALM, right? And like I could hear people behind me being like, why did she get to go in? And they're like, oh my God, she works here. At one point, they had to move the session next door to a different room mid-workshop so they could open the door, the wall in between, and get twice as many people in. And even then, it was like literal almost fistfights going. And it's like, okay, I mean, note to self, but
That's why there was so much energy. Everyone was like all adrenaline up from fist fights before the show even started.
Except
Ready to
there were
fight.
no fist fights this year. There was a fist fight last year that got us
Yeah.
kicked out of that one party, but
Well, it was
But
not a
who
concession.
were
That was
the
a
people?
concession.
Who were the people who were at Legal Week this year? I mean, were there lawyers there, or were they mostly vendor people and product people and IT people? I mean, you used to get lawyers at Legal Week, and
I'm
it
sure
seems like
there
over
were
the last few
lawyers.
years, it's fewer and
yeah.
fewer. But
I think there were lawyers, but I mean, Stephanie, the ALM must have a breakdown. I mean,
I'm positive they do. I haven't necessarily seen it, but no, there were a good number of lawyers there. I mean, I think depending on the track and the section, the session, it's, you know, very selective in who goes to what. But I feel like a lot of the more intro AI panels or like state of the industry panels actually got more of the lawyers, because you've had people that stood up in them. I mean, very openly being like, I'm an old school lawyer. This terrifies me. What do I do?
right.
So, you know, I mean,
That's
it's
true.
collective
That is
audience for
true.
each kind. Yeah.
because I thought it was interesting that Lexis study that came out this week about the sort of level of familiarity with generative AI among legal professionals and the level of use of generative AI of legal professionals, which I guess kind of said that legal professionals overall are more familiar with this stuff than the general public, but they're still not really using it for the most part. And I know, Steve, you wrote a column this week about, sort of the whole issue of are lawyers even competent to be using this
Yeah.
stuff? And so, I mean, I wondered whether that, was talked about at all in any of these programs at Legal Week, or what your thoughts are on that.
I didn't hear it talked about a lot, but I sat in that opening 3-hour marathon workshop, which was quite interesting. Like when it first started and we were all in one room, it was like being in the middle seat on a very long airplane ride. But they didn't talk about it. But as I was sitting there thinking about it, and I got some commentary to a previous post, I think a lot of people are throwing around the term Chat GPT like the term Kleenex. I mean, Kleenex is a brand, right? It's tissue paper. And I worry that some lawyers are out there reading all the hype and thinking, oh, well, I'll just go use Chat GPT to see what I can do. And it's so easy to use, right? I mean, you don't have to look hard for it. You just pop in and type something. And I don't know that certainly the commentary and the technical report by OpenAI about that it should not be, actually they say prohibited. It's prohibited to use it for important stuff like legal advice.
Like legal advice.
And I don't,
Yeah.
I don't know that message is coming across very well. And I
But
think worry
How
that there'll
much
be all
louder
this
can I
use of it, and
scream
nobody's really knowing what the hell they're using.
Well,
I've been screaming that into the void for months, even back when you all were all on this panel were laughing at me for constantly talking about it. I mean, like, yes.
I mean, that came up at the private case text event where they launched their workflow for contract review. And even they had two professors, Andy Perlman and Stephen Gillers, and they both said that they need to start teaching about it in law school. They need to have lawyers understand how to work with AI, how to be critical of AI. And even, I mean, Pablo was saying that it can be dangerous in the hands of the wrong person, and that we have to start really early in the education of lawyers so they know how to assess what it's doing. So I thought, Perlman made a really interesting comment about I think it's Rule 5.3 about supervision of assistance. And he said that, I thought it was interesting, he pointed out that they changed the word in the heading from assistant with a T to assistance with a CE. But then if you read, so it would accommodate the supervision of AI. But then I read through the whole rule and commentary, and it goes back to refer to people. So I don't think it was actually as clarified in the last ABA revision as he was suggesting it was.
Well,
No, but if you look at the ethics opinions on duty of tech competence, they talk very clearly about the duty of a lawyer to supervise the use of technology on a matter and to ensure that technology is being used properly and to ensure that confidences are being protected and all of that stuff, and to supervise any vendors using technology on a matter. So to me, that always raises this like giant catch-22 of, if you don't understand the tech, then you ain't able to supervise anybody using that tech.
Yes.
And I think that's a real problem for a lot of the legal profession right now.
I think there's two different things. This is a short-lived problem, I would suggest, because GPT-4 and the next iterations of this are exponentially. I mean, we're on that Moore's law chart where all of a sudden it just practically goes off the chart because tech is changing so exponentially quickly. So this is going to be a very small problem in a year from now. I think we're going to be in a very different place, meaning GPT-4 and the subsequent versions of it are going to be incorporated into legal tools, and the legal programmers and developers on that side are going to have given it the guidance that it needs so that they've rolled out a professional product that can be used by professionals that's reliable, because otherwise they're putting themselves at risk.
But the other thing that people don't realize is that both Lexis and Westlaw already have these answer cards. So lawyers are already relying in many, while those were not built on OpenAI, they were Wes and Lexis's version of AI generated answers. So, I mean, it's already in a lot of places.
Well, the other thing I wanted to mention too was that in relation to what Bob had just said, and it sort of ties into what you just said too, Jean, is I would suggest that my interpretation of the tech competence is that lawyers have an obligation to have a basic understanding of the tech they use, and to supervise people that like IT professionals or whomever it is that they've delegated this responsibility to, or assistants, the ethical application of these tools, meaning they have to understand the ethical implication and make sure that whoever's using these tools is complying with that, who's using these tools on their behalf. And so I think that that's more what, otherwise you can't use any output. You can't use software because you don't understand the programming. You can't use cloud computing because you don't understand AWS and cloud computing servers and how they separate information on their servers so there's not a leakage of two different companies' data or something. You can still use it and not understand that, but you have to vet the company that you're using for no matter whatever, or the company or the people, the third party. You've always had to do that. You got to vet them, make sure they've got controls in place to determine who can access the data, under what circumstances, how is the data protected, encrypted, et cetera. And that applies to like a process server. Who are you? What do you have in place to make sure that you're not handing it to the wrong person, to make sure that your employees aren't reading this if it's privileged or whatever the case may be? We've always had to do that. And this is just this different kind of vetting and tech competency issue as it applies to AI. I don't think you need to understand the underlying AI. You have to understand.
I 100% agree with that. And I would add to it the duty to actually look at the output and check it over and make sure that it's right, which I feel like that's what makes this kind of technology different to me in this conversation, is too many people are falling for it's magic, I'm out of the picture now. And I totally agree with you. You have to vet the vendor that's doing it. You have to vet how it's being used, the information that's being put in it. But also you can't just, even the most powerful models, you can't just trust them. That's a duty to remember to look this over at the end.
One of the comments I got to my previous article was an interesting, and the guy raised it, particularly in light of the warning in the technical OpenAI report, what is the impact upon that if there is a malpractice claim, both substantively as to the claim and from an insurance coverage standpoint. If you use Chat GPT to do something that's prohibited, how does that impact it? And I will hasten to add, now that I've raised the word malpractice, that Mr. Ambrosi has finally publicly admitted that he was the one that said it will someday be malpractice not to use data analytics. So
I found my
finally,
quote.
controversy has ended.
Yeah. Yeah. Nikki, I'm not entirely sure I agree with you about the tech composite. We don't need to go off on that tangent, but I mean, again, if you read some of those key ethics, like that, the ABA one from a couple of years ago on data on email encryption and whatever. I mean, one of the things they say several times in that opinion that lawyers need to understand, how email is transmitted, where it's stored, how data is transmitted electronically, where it's stored, how it's protected, where it's stored. I mean, they do have to understand something about the actual technology here. It's not enough to just have a third party
I 100%
advising you on
agree.
this. Yeah.
I may have missed what you have to understand the basic of that underlying technology, but you don't have to understand the programming behind how emails encrypted.
Right. You don't
Or
have to be totally, yeah.
how does AWS compartmentalize the data on their huge servers between different companies. I 100% I tell a story when I give talks about how my daughter was served alcohol by my aunt and how she told me later on, 8th grade health class didn't prepare me for this, Mom. I know I'm supposed to just say no, but I'm also supposed to be polite, and I said, well, what do you do? And I thought about everything I'd learned and what they told me and so I drank the wine. And I was like, good, at least you've used your education and the foundational learning to make an informed decision. And so lawyers have to have that. I agree 100%. And I don't mean to imply that I agree with you on that. 100%.
One of the analogies I just was thinking of, an analogy from the movie Interstellar, which I don't know if many people watched, but there's a point where they're having a conversation about how people who used to, great sailors, there were great sailors who never learned how to swim. And there's something to not understanding why the thing is happening, but still understanding the mechanics of how the boat works. And that those are two distinct things. I feel like that's the line that we don't really have a rule for, elegantly written for, but that's the distinction here, I think.
So the suspense is killing me because Joe, you put something earlier in the chat that there was actually something interesting besides AI at Legalweek. So what was that?
Liquid text. It was amazing. It was so much fun. Let me see if I can find. I actually haven't.
Oh, I've written about liquid text.
Oh yeah, it's amazing.
Oh, yeah. I wrote about it a long time ago when it first came out, but it is a really cool
man.
tool.
So I had a meeting with it. I saw it, and at first I was getting the pitch, and I was hearing a lot of things where I was like, yeah, I mean,
I wrote about it in
whatever.
2017.
Sure.
That's a long time ago. Never mind.
Wow. Yeah. So because it didn't start as a legal application, right? It started as something more broad, I think.
Well, my
obviously
headline was, "This app may forever change how you read legal documents." That's what I wrote in 2017.
Yeah. So I saw it, and then later in the day, I saw Caroline Hill, who has decided to ghost us yet again. But Caroline was watching it. There is some AI in there, but it's not going to be GPT-ish AI. Let's put it that way. All right. So there's AI in everything, but there's not like that kind of AI. Anyway, sitting with, I saw Caroline getting her briefing, and right after it, I walked over and said, "Wasn't that cool?" And she was effusive and explicitly said that it was cool, expletively said it was cool. It was really impressive, just the ways in which the kind of the pitch he gives that I think is very accurate is that people try to turn paper into digital all the time, and we end up getting the worst of both worlds because we try to create digital versions of paper. And what his research, when he was getting his PhD, was on is what are the parts of paper that the human brain finds so appealing, and just bringing that part over to digital while maintaining the digital frame. And I gotta say, playing around with it, all I could think is that is exactly what he did. He took the parts of paper that I like without all the parts I don't, and built something. Yeah, we were impressed. And there were other people. I don't know who all's in this conversation. I know I talked to Deb Tessard. She also pointed out that was the coolest thing she saw. Yeah, we were
I know.
There was a lot of people talking.
Yeah, Reese from our team is the one that took that briefing, and he loved it too. Yeah.
Good. Well, I'm glad to see they're getting. I haven't looked at it lately. I gotta check it out again. But I'm glad to hear because I thought that was a cool product way back when I first saw it. What else? What was the big debate between Gene and Joe about research billing codes? Was that part of?
I don't think Joe understood why I went down this. Well, you know how we were.
I do. I do. I understand the reason because I was there too back in the day. But yeah.
No, but no, the immediate reason was we were in a room with all these executives from Lexis. And they were talking about how wonderful they're putting IntelliGize and they're putting LexMog, and they're moving all of it into the main Lexis platform. The problem with that is that today, 99% of lawyers have to go through the scourge of putting in a billing number and the potential of charging a client. And I am at this point in my career so completely fed up with the idea of cost recovery, which has continued to plummet. And my first blog post that put my blog on the map back in 2011 was, we are wasting our time and we are distracting lawyers from finding the answer. The only thing we should care about is serving the client and making sure the associates get to the answer quickly, and putting all these barriers and these anxiety and fear about cost. You know, how much does this document cost? What if I do this? What if I do that? It ka-ching, 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 it paralyzes associates. And unfortunately, Lexis's vision of creating their unified Lexis universe involves moving all these previously get it on your own, get standalone products such as IntelliGize. Even their practical guidance tool is behind the paywall unless you insist that they remove it. Their treatises are behind the paywall. So I am just cranky and fed up with the whole thing. And
yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, and I get that. And we had a meeting to hear about their new products, and as soon as this was mentioned, this became most of the meeting for a while. But I understand that concern because I definitely remember being a young associate and seeing and policing my own research, sitting back and saying, like, I don't want to put in this query because I don't want to arguably cost us more money. Right. And by us, I mean theoretically the client, but as Gene points out, we were already on a downward slide as to whether or not that was recoverable. So cost us any more money. And so I got that. That said, I also see the analytic argument that knowing what work is being done on a case is valuable for the analytics side. You need to know that, we did these queries for this matter number to be able to crunch the number and be like, here's what's being used. I think that's a thing that you can't capture too many other ways. I also think that there's something to be said for saving searches and having kind of an integrated across all of those different products. Here's all the stuff that people looked at with regard to this matter number. And so I see that as value too. And I get the paralyzation argument because I think it's real, or at least it used to be. I don't know if maybe in some firms, maybe younger associates have been trained on, we're never going to recover this, so just go crazy. But if they are still being told that things cost money, they need to maybe be better trained that not everything costs money just because you put a matter number in there. But I see a value to it. I see a reason why they need to maintain that, barring some other mechanism for keeping all of that tied to a matter.
I agree with you if that's what we're happening, but I actually don't think that there is any law firm that takes the data from the client data from Lexis and Westlaw and analyzes it. I've just never heard of that happening. I think it's more likely there are now desktop tools that can capture what associates are doing at different times of the day. And I think it's more likely to happen passively. But I think that, so at one point, I had just said to Carl, I just said, just take away the billing apparatus, and he said, well, why should we? And I pointed out later that Lexis had actually invented, and I don't know, Bob, you were probably around when, Lexis' first online
This is
system.
Stone Age,
I
is what
was
we're talking about?
too. I was too,
Shots
and I guess
fired.
maybe Steve was. But initially, it was a marketing tool, I think, because online research was so alien. And at that point, Lexis was charging on an actual incremental basis. There was a real retail invoice associated with every search. That is long gone. And so now we're in a completely different environment. 30 years later, clients don't want to pay for it. Everyone has a flat fee contract. And there's this whole funny money, and still it's paralyzing associates and keeping them from focusing on just getting the friggin' answer.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I feel like there's a transition here to Stephanie's story about Sally and codes and using GPT to automate the insertion of Sally codes. But in my COVID fog, I'm not exactly sure what that transition is. But we can just go run with it.
I kind of felt that too. Once they said codes, I'm like, oh, there's a Sally.
Yeah. It's got to be codes,
Yeah.
billing stuff.
Yeah. So Sally has supercharged all their coding there. I mean, it was actually fascinating. I got the demo advance of what they did at Legalweek, but I was not as familiar with the work of Sally before this, but they've just, everything they were showing me, like Damien Real said, they were trying to get everyone to speak the same data language within legal, and just their ability to just go through, say your law firm calls something this wacky practice area, but really what you mean is something straightforward. It can recognize that, and it applies codes to everything. And it's just, I mean, it helps from the billing, it helps and they want to do it too within Lexis, within Westlaw. So everyone, anytime you're talking about a practice area or a task or a matter thing, everyone's using the same data language, and it makes billing easier, it makes everything easier. And it's just it's kind of mind blowing to watch it happen in real time when you watch the demo.
Yeah, I think what's cool, I think I actually just saw, you mentioned, I think, Michael Bomarito and Dan Katz creating this integration using GPT in order to kind of automatically, I guess, tag or programmatically tag stuff with Sally tags. And I saw at LinkedIn, maybe just today or yesterday, they've now put it up like an open, I think you mentioned your story too, but they put up an open to anybody interface to use to try that out, where you can kind of just drop in some text and it will tell you the tags, and you can always go in and play with the Sally tags directly. But it kind of relates back to Lexis and Westlaw, because both Lexis and Westlaw say they are working with Sally and cooperating with Sally and developing this taxonomy. But then when you kind of push them on it, they're both also maintaining their own taxonomies and their own standards, which they both say are, more mature and more advanced than the Sally taxonomy. So I think that's going to be a real big question going forward of how you get, you're going to have to get those big players, the Bloombergs and the Westlaws and the LexisNexis and everything, kind of fully embracing the Sally standards in order for that to really become a universal standard. But then it can maybe help address some of the very kinds of concerns you're talking about, Gene, a few minutes ago.
And ideally, with this new AI behind it, more people will adopt it because it's so much easier to apply. And I just wanted to highlight, from writing this up, I mean, I respect them on the level of, we're always talking about, GPT and people slapping labels on things and claiming it's this when it's not this. And talking to them, I was like, okay, so I'm clear, do you want me to run with this, you're using GPT-4? And they're like, well, actually, can you say that we have access to GPT-4 and access to GPT 3.5 Turbo? And we're figuring out what is the best use and which part of it. And our whole goal is to do it the fastest, most possible way. Sometimes this model might be slower, even though it's technically more advanced. And they're doing it so thoughtfully. And I found that aspect refreshing in a world where we're all starting to see PR where people are just slapping labels on things, even if it's not things. Like, they're really doing a thoughtful job of it. And I appreciate that.
Yeah. What else? I mean, Nikki, you mentioned the keynote in your notes for the show here. What did you think?
Well, the reason I wanted to bring up the keynote is, first, I thought it was really good, but I also think that there are some analogies to what he was talking about, which was storytelling and authenticity in storytelling, to
Which is LeVar Burton. in
Going.
case we didn't mention
Yes,
it. Yeah,
that's
yeah.
what I was just going to jump in.
Yeah.
sorry.
LeVar Burton. I didn't mention his
Oh,
name, but LeVar
LeVar
Burton. was
Burton,
the
yeah.
key-
Sorry. But there's analogies to sort of where we're headed and how AI is going to impact storytelling and the jobs that we all do. And so that's what I thought was so interesting, was what he was saying, because, LeVar Burton, I was excited because I'm a Trekkie and I'm a geek, and Star Trek: The Next Generation got me through law school. So I was super excited about that. But really, I think what drives him and the essence of sort of who he's become and what really resonates with him is the storytelling from him doing the Reading Rainbow all those years. And so what he talked about was how storytelling is really what drives him. And storytelling is sort of the essence of what makes us human, of what brings us together in community. And that what people truly want to hear is authenticity. And they want to understand why people do what they do and who they are and, what drives them. And he also talked a little bit about how another reason storytelling is so important to him is having grown up as a Black man in our culture, and he's 66, I think he said, growing up, there were in the stories that he read and watched, there were not a lot of role models that looked anything like him. And so partly that's why he was drawn to science fiction. And Gene Roddenberry was this idea. And that's what I loved about Star Trek: The Next Generation. There's just women and women work, and there's no sexism, and there's people and aliens, and it doesn't matter what you look like or who you are. We all just contribute to society, and money doesn't matter. Like, it's this wonderful utopia of the future. And where AI just does our bidding and we're all just super happy. But he talked about how that's partly what drove him to Star Trek, and how part of what he tries to do is include diversity in storytelling so that everyone eventually sees themselves represented in like the storytelling that occurs in our culture. But what, in retrospect, sort of looking back on that, and he was a wonderful speaker, he uses alliteration and he pauses and he has a resonance to his voice, and it was almost like poetry. And it was such an atypical keynote for Legal Week as well, or Legal Week, what it's become, which I also really enjoyed. That it was a message that he didn't tie back to what we were all thinking about, but I, of course, like what we're there for, but I, of course, did, because what AI can do, what ChatGPT can do wonderfully, is tell a story in the voice of whoever. And even though it puts these hallucinations out there, it can do a lot of the things that we do pretty well. Like, it can write a news article about a conference, it can write headlines. And so and he's correct, like the essence of what really draws us to storytelling and the stories that are told is the humanity of it and the authenticity of it. And that's exactly what AI does not bring to this. So it makes me wonder about the future of our world and where we're headed, where you have some very strange things that will be happening that will make you question reality and the authenticity of reality, where people are going to use, generative AI to create LinkedIn posts. And then they're going to use generative AI to respond to LinkedIn posts. And eventually it's just going to be generative AI on social media and elsewhere talking to generative AI. And we're not even going to know if there's humans behind it or not. And so it's like we get to the point where we lose the essence of what makes us human and what reality actually is. And so I wonder how that's going to impact our world and what that's going to look like, since he's correct. Like, that's part of what
I've thought a lot about that
humanity
too,
of it.
Nikki, and I was very impressed by it. And, I keep going back though. I mean, what's the old saying? You have to decide what business you're in. And as lawyers, I think we were in the business of communication and persuasion. And that's why storytelling is so effective. But we are in the business of persuading other humans, right? And so that's why I wonder with the ChatGPT, whether it will ever get sophisticated enough to actually persuade humans in the way we are used to being persuaded.
Well, you say that, but the Colombian, and Stephanie will know the facts better, but I know she talked about it, but that Colombian judge who's already using ChatGPT to and the creation of his opinions. So it's going to leak into everything that we do as lawyers and as writers, because we're all here journalists too, but it's going to really creep into what we do and change sort of the essence of what we do. And I'm not sure, as much as I absolutely love ChatGPT and everything, if this is I don't think it's a good thing. I don't know what it's going to look like. It's a little terrifying.
Yeah, when I was in a presentation with Pablo at Tech Show, and somebody from the audience, it may have been Kevin O'Keefe, asked, well, won't ChatGPT just let you write the blog for you or write the brief for you? And I said, well, we'll write the novel for you or the story for you. And I said, well, maybe, but ChatGPT can't write a story like Ernest Hemingway, right? I mean, that's unique. But then I thought after that, well, at some point it probably can, if you ask it to write it in terms of, how in the style of Ernest Hemingway. But what it probably can't do, and this may be really unfortunate, is write the story of the next Ernest Hemingway would write. Because Ernest Hemingway broke the storytelling model, the novel model, the story model with what he did. And if we start using artificial intelligence to write all these things for us, does that suppress the ability of the next Ernest Hemingway, the next Picasso, for example, to have that room to grow and develop and create their own voice? That's kind of a worrisome thing to me.
Yeah, I agree. And go ahead, Bob.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
Oh, no, I agree. And I mean, it can be a little worrisome. So when I was doing the other keynote with Dan Schulman, we ended up talking a lot about this because he's talked, in being in the tech world, he's talked to a lot of people in the generative AI space and whatever. And he went so far as to say, that the quote that genius is 1% perspiration, 99% inspiration. Did I get that right? Yeah. He's like, and everyone thinks that AI is coming for that perspiration part, the rote work, but he said it's really coming for the inspiration. Like creative is the biggest thing it's going for. And some of the tools he said are terrifying. But I guess where I come out on it is that I still want to encourage everyone to think of it, sort of as a starting point, because that's the most optimistic I can be about it, because I don't want to be all, fear mongering and doomsy about it. But yeah, it can launch those things, but maybe hopefully it can be a starting point to come to better things. I don't know. It's tough. It is tough, especially as the writer side. I agree.
Can it actually mimic human experience and human emotion? I don't see how it could ever get there.
Now, when I was in Provo a couple of weeks ago, which may be where I got this disease, I got an email afterward from one of the law librarians there asking if she could quote me in an article. And it was one of those things again where I said that I did not remember that I said it, but it sounded good when she quoted it back to me, which was something about the idea that you can use things like ChatGPT to write a legal brief, but some of the best legal briefs are the legal briefs that are written in a totally creative way, that are not written formulaically. If you start just relying on programs to create legal briefs, you're going to end up losing that whole idea of being creative in legal writing. And maybe sometimes, we've all seen those examples of the kind of briefs circulating around the internet here and there where somebody just, writes a brief in poetry or just does something totally crazy, or uses comics to illustrate a brief or something, where it makes the brief so much more persuasive and so much more compelling because they've inserted that creative spark that I don't know if GPT gets us there.
Yeah.
Well, you just reminded me of sort of a different spin on, I had a long interview with Dan Rabinowitz from Predicta, and he is not using OpenAI technology, but his approach to his prediction tool is finding out the unique characteristics of judges. And that's the premise it's built on. That judges, their experience, where they went to law school, who they associate with, in some ways it reminds me of where Ravel started in sort of saying, well, judges rely on certain precedents, but he doesn't look at precedent at all. He only looks at the human being and how what he knows about the human being is likely to impact the outcome of cases.
I met with him too, and that was my most memorable briefing, I would say. And I was super impressed both by how you described it, which is that that tool simply looks at everything you could possibly know about the judge and then the case number, if they have it, if it's already been filed. And it can predict, according to him, with 84 to 85% accuracy, whether you're going to win or lose a motion to dismiss in federal court. That's pretty shocking if it's true. Like that's
right.
Right.
And now he's moving into state court with the gabalytics. The other thing I learned about, and he apparently he won an award at the awards night, which was, I thought was great since he wasn't
Innovator of the Year in vendor categories.
Yeah, that was great. Well, the other great thing I learned about him is that he is actually a Hebrew literature scholar, and he's like a rare book scholar. So we got off on a great tangent with that.
I didn't learn that during my briefing. I think that would have been super interesting. That's very cool.
But it's interesting what we were talking before about, can it do that? I mean, so we already have sentiment analysis coming into e-discovery, right? Where they're able to sort of parse sentiment and tone out of documents. Doesn't seem as far of a stretch to me once you can do sentiment analysis to eventually do sentiment generation. I mean, TM, I coined that term just now, I guess. But, you can't do these things yet, but like, I don't think they're that far off. The things you were talking about, Bob, like, to go in and be like, write a creative legal brief in the form of a comic book.
Yeah, maybe, I guess.
I don't know.
All right, so what I'm hearing is this Legal Week is kind of a thing, and I should probably think about going to it next year.
I learned a lot of lessons personally from my first one of how to do my second one. So it would be nice for us to be there at the same time.
I think the better lesson for you, Bob, is not to get sick so you can't go to Legal Week.
Yeah, I'll work on that going forward.
Or avoid Provo.
Yeah. All right. Well, anything else we want to talk about this week? I mean, kind of a little bit off topic, but I also thought it was maybe worth just mentioning this sort of another couple steps this week in the whole evolution. There's a lot of talk lately about the whole marriage of fintech and legal tech, and the one conference I did go to that you guys didn't go to, that one in Miami a while ago, the Legal Tech Fund conference, where they kept just talking a whole lot about, had several panels on the kind of marriage between fintech and legal tech. And there was a story this week about this company, Lean Law, which is a sort of cloud-based financial management system for law firms. It raised what was it, $5 million or something like that. I actually hadn't heard that much about them, honestly, even though apparently they've been around for several years now. But they kind of bill themselves as a sort of midway between financial management and practice management. And I thought that was interesting only because, LawPay just put out its LawPay Pro, which they announced, a couple months ago, but I think they were again talking about it at Nikki's briefing this week at Legal Week and a tech show. But LawPay Pro is sort of also this sort of bridge between a pure sort of financial payments platform and a practice management platform. And so I think it's interesting that we're kind of seeing these products that are a little bit hybrid finance and practice management without fully practice management. And I don't know what that signifies exactly, but it seems to be a trend that's a couple of different companies are evidencing now. And again, from the talk at that Legal Tech Fund conference back in Miami, I think. Oh, and then the other one is like Noda, which is the sort of the bank for lawyers, and they've been making a big push now as a sort of a banking application for lawyers. And should lawyers, it could be interesting to see how the conversation goes around that in the wake of everything that's happened with Silicon Valley
I thought the
Bank.
bank for lawyers was Signature Bank.
You know, actually, but
They
that raises
were.
another question. I was really surprised there was really no discussion of any of the tech startups being in trouble because of Silicon Valley Bank. And I thought there'd be a little bit of discussion of that, and I didn't hear a word. Did anybody else hear anything?
No, that's true. I didn't hear
It's
anything either.
very clear that none of you came to the keynote I moderated.
Yeah. Yeah, it was because I went to Nikki's dinner.
Yeah. Well, no, I mean, we didn't talk about it in depth, but I did raise it, with PayPal being straddling the banking and tech worlds. And I did ask, I brought up that issue. It was one of many questions we talked about in a very short period of time, but I would like it on the record that it was raised at Legalweek by myself.
Yeah,
Right,
I
but
had
not that any of the legal tech startups were hit. You were talking to tech generally, but
Well,
but
no, I said
did
it. There's
anybody-
probably a lot of startups in this room that were impacted by it,
Well,
And
they,
nobody
none of them
quit.
were
Wasn't gonna
impacted
call them out.
ultimately because of what happened. I
got
mean,
it
I
back.
actually
That's-
scrambled
well,
that
yeah.
weekend and made a bunch of phone calls, and I was actually able to track down a couple of different legal tech companies that were wondering how they were going to make payroll on Monday at that point. But then by Monday, they were making payroll. So I never did a story because like one guy talked to me in depth, and then he was kind of like, maybe I shouldn't have told you all that stuff. I just told you about how I'm in danger of going out of business if this, so I ended up not
Didn't
writing
the federal
about it.
government make sure
Yeah,
that
so
everybody didn't
it
lose their
ended
money?
being
So that's
a
why it's not
non-issue for
story.
them.
Yeah.
I think the more interesting
socialized
issue,
losses for all.
yeah, I think the more interesting issue going forward is what happened with some of what it might mean for lawyers as well as legal tech companies in terms of where they want to be putting their money. Did you have an IOLTA? If you had your IOLTA funds there, what did that tell you about where you should be putting your IOLTA money, and what duty do you have to be monitoring, the health of a bank? Could you have known something there? Would you have been negligent somehow if you had lost all that money if it was in an IOLTA account there?
Well, and one thing I read that was super interesting, I'm not sure if it's still the case or not, so maybe y'all can tell me, was that that you need to know where your clients hold all their other money, because I read that it'll protect someone up to the maximum 250,000, like an entity or a person, but total that the bank holds, and that the IOLTA is a part of that total, like the money that's being held in a lawyer's IOLTA. And I'm not sure if this was outdated. It was from a Jim Calloway post from quite a while ago.
No, it's a great point, but the government has already said they're going to blow past the 250 limit for bailing these guys out.
But generally speaking,
correct.
Because then if you say I'm a business and I have 200,000 of my own dollars there, and I paid a lawyer 150, and the lawyer puts it in their IOLTA, who happens to be at the same bank, then your money's not protected under that 250 limit because you've got more than 250 there. So that was not an issue that was ever on my radar. And I wonder if it's something lawyers need to start asking their clients, just to make sure that their clients know that we're putting this in an IOLTA that's in the same bank you may be having money close to that limit.
I heard a story, I don't know if it's true, of a lawyer just having received a settlement check and putting it in the IOLTA in Silicon Valley earlier that week, for like $600,000 or something like that. And then, biting his fingernails in terms of what was going to happen. I don't know if we set a date yet, but I'm actually going to be part of a CLE program this week. I think it's on Lawline on this topic this next week. We're going to have some IOLTA specialists and some banking specialists and some lawyer liability specialists, I think, talking about all of this. All right, well, I think we have done it for this week, and appreciate hearing everything that almost made me feel like I was there, just hearing all about it. So I appreciate that. And until next week, thanks to everybody, and hope you all have a good weekend and a good week.
Bye, Al.
I'll
Great weekend, everyone.